My name is Judy Han, and I am 51 years old. I was born in Seoul, Korea.
My name is Jennifer Chun. I am 50 years old and I was also born in Seoul, Korea. Well, I think for me, because sort of grappling with what it means to be Korean American came quite later in my life, I probably that's not a sort of that's not necessarily the way that I think about my own identity formation. Probably I was always really identified with being a girl, and I think that that's probably about the racialization of Asian girls or Korean girls. I think very much gender socialization was a part of how I understood who I was and how I was disciplined in different ways. I grew up without any queer community, without any language around what it might be to be queer. No, like there was just no discussion. So one of the things that I remember when talking to my high school friends about the fact that I was in a relationship with Judy, I would hear things that we said when we were in high school back to me, like, oh, that's so gay. It seems so funny to say now because it's so not part of my world, but that was just a regular thing that we said all the time. Oh, that's so gay. And then I have to say, I don't think you should say that. But even for me, like, how do I tell my sister or my friends that that's offensive? I think for me, part of being a queer Korean American woman was to go back and to encounter how homophobic my own kind of upbringing was, but homophobic in a way that people just thought it was part of the common sense. So I guess in a way, being Korean American and being identified with a kind of progressive identity of being Korean American did sort of compel me to go back and rethink a lot of relationships I had with people growing up, with my own family, with high school friends, and things like that.
I think it's complicated for me. It's complicated to sort out what's Korean and Korean American and what's gender or sexual identity for me because they've always been so enmeshed. For some reason, I keep thinking about when I was in college, like and walking through campus, there would be the different student groups tabling for their events and stuff. And it would be interesting. I remember distinctly whenever I approached a Korean student group to see what they're up to pick up their literature. As soon as I would approach the tables, they would sort of take one look at me and start saying like, "Oh, this is all in Korean. Sorry, we don't have anything in English," or something like that. There was a way that they immediately distanced themselves, or they saw me as somebody who's not Korean, which I felt it was odd, to be honest, because I didn't think I was. I mean, I have blue hair now, but it's not like it was because of the way I looked or anything. But there was something about being queer. There was something about being a strong woman or being feminist or being tall or butch. I don't know, maybe all those things that made a lot of Korean spaces tense up with my presence in my proximity. And I sensed that in my family, in community spaces. I could see that I disrupted things just by being there, just by being close to it. I can't say I enjoy it every time, right? Because I don't want to make people feel tense and uncomfortable every time I come near them. But at some point, I also realized that, you know what, though? They're going to have to just put up with it. And then I think I started not care. That's what happens at that intersection for me. I think, especially being queer and being Korean, there are tensions that arise sort of by accident, not necessarily by intention or by plan, but that can also result in some change, discomfort, but hopefully change after that. I think I probably knew I was queer or gay. I first came out actually as bi. I think when I was in sixth grade, actually, I remember writing something in my journal and stuff, like wondering if I was gay or something different. And I think I was just waiting till I was old enough to leave the house so I didn't have to worry about my parents or anything like that. And for me, that sense of like freedom And independence came with leaving home to go to college, which I know, of course, not a lot of people have the privilege of experiencing. But for me, that was the occasion. But even in middle school, even in high school, I think whether it was in family spaces or I did go to church for a little bit. I stopped at some point, but even in church spaces, I think that feeling of not quite belonging, literally the word queer, sort of being odd, not fitting, that feeling was something that I learned to politicize, I think, eventually. That it wasn't my fault. That me being queer is precisely what it means to live in a heterosexist or patriarchal society.
For me, I think I'm still in a process of figuring out how I identify with being queer. I think partially, if I were to think about a quote unquote origin story, it's very much like feminism and reading. I think when I was in college, I remember reading about the lesbian continuum. Was that Adrienne Rich? And I remember that was the first time that I realized that there's this thing called compulsive heterosexuality and that gender and sexuality could be a continuum. And I think that was the first time I just opened up my mind to the possibility that there wasn't just two genders and just, you're either straight or queer. But it was all intellectual and political until I got to grad school and really was in a community where there were just a lot more queer, gay and lesbian, bi, not so many trans people at the time, but there was just more of an openness. And I think it was then that I met Judy. And I have to say that I did not think it was a big deal. I didn't even think it was a big deal to have to tell my parents because I thought it's not going to last. You know what I mean? I hadn't had any relationship that had lasted up until that point. And so I thought, this isn't going to be like some different pattern. I'll just play it out until it ends. And, I was just so used to basically never telling my parents the truth about anything that, I live far away from them. It was really not a big deal.
But for context also, you're also not a planner.
Yes, maybe I live a bit in denial. But anyways, I think that is sort of, for me, what gave me the space not to feel fear and not to be worried about, for example, like what are the costs of giving up compulsive heterosexuality. I think the good part of that is that I was able to work through a lot of my own fear, a lot of my own internalized homophobia in a supportive community. And to really come to terms with the fact that I did feel fear of what it would be like to choose to spend my life with a woman. And what would that mean? How would people look at me? I think that's what happens when you're cisgender, female, straight passing. I would never have to deal with people thinking I was queer until they saw me with Judy. I moved in the world exactly how I did before. And I probably like that was like a security blanket. But now I feel like partly because I don't, Judy and I don't work in a workplace where it's stigmatized. We've always worked, our first job was in Canada. We could have gotten married if we wanted to.
Oh, people kept pressuring us.
Yeah, but we have some political opinions about marriage. So in some ways, I feel like I've had a really easy path.
But for some reason, I just remembered. Do you remember going to that dog park in Oakland? Like you took the dogs for a couple of times, and she came and said, "You need to come with me. These lesbians are really mean, and they won't talk to me."
And then only when I was with Judy.
And then as soon as I showed up,
queer folks be nice to me. Anyways, I was not cool.
Yeah,
I was
funny.
My name is Jennifer Jihae Chun.
I am Judy Han.
And this is our Korean American story.